Ladies and gentlemen, in the world of modern intelligence, silence does not mean peace. Sometimes it is the sign of an undercurrent storm being handled by the most advanced security protocols. Recently, international cybersecurity observers have been buzzing over a shocking hypothesis. Is it possible that a renowned federal investigative agency is quietly activating Level 1 surveillance mode on a public figure who was once part of the royal family? Unverified sources suggest that the incident began with a strange signal penetrating the most inviolable place of all the data files of a child member of the royal family. Join us as we decode the fragments of this potential security case through the lens of systems analysis. According to corridor chatter, experts from the Digital Protection Unit have detected anomalies in traffic flow. The target was not assets, but real-time location data and the academic schedule of a young VIP. Experts assess that this was not the work of impulsive hackers. The method of access to the private school's data portal suggests the intruder appeared to have detailed knowledge of internal procedures. Rather than making a public announcement that could cause panic, the defensive system seems to have opted for a strategy of silent containment, coordinating across channels between MI5 and intelligence partners across the ocean to trace the activity back to its source. The story grows even more gripping when we analyze the digital coordinates. There are unverified rumors suggesting that electronic traces led investigators to an IP address linked to former personnel who once served on the staff of a duchess. One detail with a distinctly detective novel flavor has been highlighted by the online community surveillance logs allegedly leaked, recorded the presence of a related individual in the Notting Hill area. Coincidentally, this location fell within the signal radius of a cybersecurity firm just 24 hours after the data breach occurred. Is this merely a random coincidence explained by statistical probability, or a calculated link in a deliberate chain of actions? We cannot say for certain yet, but in the world of counterintelligence, coincidence is rarely taken at face value. Wait a moment. Let me ask you something. Is there anyone here who believes in coincidences that line up down to the very second like this? Comment number 2 if you think this was orchestrated. If you believe it was purely random, leave a number 5 in the comments below. Your perspective is crucial as we move forward into the forensic evidence segment coming up next. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our upcoming videos. If this hypothesis is correct, then the matter has moved beyond the realm of entertainment gossip and crossed into the threshold of national security. An anonymous source, reportedly from within a federal investigative agency, has hinted at the possible existence of a dedicated digital forensic analysis operation. According to this account, not only public devices but the entire digital ecosystem surrounding this individual, from encrypted communication channels and internal applications to disposable devices, burner phones, is now under forensic scrutiny. The system appears to have determined that the intrusion was not an isolated incident. It looked more like a comprehensive data collection effort spanning everything from charitable logistics systems to the travel schedules of other senior figures within the royal family. Anonymous intelligence sources are now raising a chilling hypothesis. What we are witnessing is not simply the curiosity of a single individual, but rather a structured information harvesting matrix, with the ultimate objective being to narrow and control access to high-level logistics data related to the royal family's young members. The severity of the situation reached a peak amid rumors that the UK's cyber threat response team, an entity typically activated only in the face of national-level terrorist plots, had quietly been brought in. In leaked redacted documents, Although the identity of the central figure was obscured, the coded phrase, "a close partner in North America," appeared repeatedly more than 20 times, standing out as a dangerous variable in this security equation. Across the ocean, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, is reportedly believed to have expanded its scanning perimeter to the Montecito area. We are not talking about classic phone tapping, but the most advanced signal intelligence SIGINT measures analyzing data packets over Wi-Fi and using artificial intelligence AI to isolate voices from ambient noise. On July 1st, an independent digital forensic analyst known by the alias Digital Barrister released a startling finding. Data traces from this location indicated an abnormal and sudden spike in outbound traffic. The timing aligned perfectly down to the very second with the moment the security breach occurred in London. The hypothesis being raised is this was someone carrying out a large-scale data transmission right under the noses of the authorities. The tension truly escalated when a whistleblower revealed the existence of ambient audio recordings, a type of evidence that is legally permitted to be collected only under statutes governing foreign counterintelligence operations. Linguistic experts analyzing the recording concluded that it involved the use of dual-use language. What outwardly sounded like an ordinary PR discussion actually contained coded references to damage control and mentions of a master file designed with encryption to prevent reverse tracing. The tension truly erupted when a whistleblower revealed the existence of ambient audio recordings, a type of evidence that is legally permitted to be collected only under provisions governing foreign counterintelligence operations. Linguistic experts analyzing the recording concluded that it involved the use of dual-use language. What outwardly sounded like an ordinary PR discussion actually contained coded references to damage control and mentions of a master file designed with encryption to prevent reverse tracing. The situation grew even more gripping with the emergence of a memo titled Operation Mind Archive. This intelligence report highlighted 3 critical details: a sudden surge in encrypted calls just before H hour and repeated data transmissions to a suspicious IP address in Berlin, a location previously linked to past diplomatic leaks. And most alarming of all, an audio clip is said to contain an ultimatum-like statement: "If they want war, we will deliver the truth." Analysts believe this line implies that the data collection was not intended for immediate use, but rather to build an information arsenal designed to exert strategic pressure on the monarchy. Notably, the wording suggests a systematic fixation on the future monarch Princess Charlotte. The era of street corner speculation appears to be over, as observers now assess that the situation has escalated from a family dispute into a transnational security matrix. Leaked information suggests the emergence of an unprecedented cooperative mechanism between the FBI United States and its MI5 and MI6 counterparts. United Kingdom provisionally referred to as Operation Ivy. In internal security documents reportedly circulating, the central figure is no longer identified by name, but has instead been assigned the code name Subject Number 1. Buckingham Palace now appears to be facing not only media scrutiny, but also immense pressure demanding transparency over this alleged security vulnerability. But what sends the deepest chill through behavioral psychology experts is the reaction of the central figure: absolute silence. No legal denial statements. No cryptic social media posts as seen in the past. No PR maneuvers whatsoever. This sudden disappearance from the media battlefield is referred to by intelligence analysts as a strategic vacuum. It signals that the narrative has shifted from entertainment gossip to a high-risk reality where civilian legal levers are no longer effective and all sides are cautiously watching one another as if engaged in a geopolitical chess match. July 10th marked a turning point when the firewall was breached. A 17-page classified file titled Subject M, One Timeline and Anomalous Trigger Factors was leaked through encrypted channels on the dark web. The document provided a digital forensics map containing data described as irrefutable, including GeoInt geospatial intelligence. On June 18th, location tracking reportedly showed the subject remaining for 19 minutes outside a critical telecommunications infrastructure facility in Virginia, a site not accessible to civilians. Device evidence: a decrypted log from a burner phone recorded a message sent just 16 hours after the royal family data leak. The translated content is "chilling completed. I need to establish plausible deniability." This detail implies a calculated effort to erase traces of linkage rather than merely creating geographic distance. The report also reveals an internal FBI note describing Subject M1's strategy as desensitization, a process aimed at gradually conditioning the public to repeated leaks of private information involving royal minors, thereby reducing public outrage over time. As this information began to surface, paparazzi lenses captured images of a black SUV speeding out of the Montecito estate, with the individual inside heavily shielded by a dense security detail. This did not resemble a casual outing, but rather bore the hallmarks of an emergency extraction protocol triggered when a situation spirals beyond control. By July 11th, whispers had turned into a red alert. Diplomatic sources indicated that MI6 and the FBI had carried out a rare information exchange procedure, one typically reserved for high-level espionage investigations. Meghan Markle's file is reportedly no longer categorized under celebrity, but has instead been labeled cross-domain sensitive influence risk. The final question posed to us is this: when an individual holds the data keys to a monarchical institution, does that constitute personal freedom or a national security threat? According to prevailing hypotheses among observers, we are witnessing an asymmetric information war. The close circle around Subject M1 Meghan is believed to have engineered a calculated destabilization campaign targeting the royal family's credibility in child rearing, with the ultimate focal point being the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate. However, the atmosphere inside the palace has shifted. Leaked images show Kate leaving a high-level security meeting with an expression analysts describe as a steely composure. Internal sources confirm that she has moved from passive defense to legal counteroffensive mode. This is no longer about image management, but the instinct of a mother prepared to expose her opponent in order to establish an absolute safety zone for Princess Charlotte. However, the atmosphere inside the palace has indeed changed as leaked images once again capture Kate departing a top-tier security briefing with that same unmistakably cold, resolute demeanor. Internal sources confirm that she has shifted from a stance of passive defense to a legal counteroffensive. This is no longer about preserving public image, but the instinct of a mother prepared to expose her adversary in order to establish an absolute safety zone for Princess Charlotte. Back in London, Kate is reportedly not waiting to be rescued. She is said to be quietly compiling a forensic chronicle, a comprehensive collection of digital evidence documenting the attacks dating back to 2021. This forms the foundation for a potentially explosive legal case. The situation is said to be so serious that Meghan's name has reportedly been placed into a restricted database, making her the subject of an unprecedented cross-border surveillance operation targeting a civilian. The question being asked is no longer does she want to respond, but rather, from a legal standpoint, does she still have the right to speak at all? On July 14th, the crisis is said to have officially crossed the threshold into a matter of national security. The UK Parliament's Homeland Security Committee convened an emergency session. Although most of the meeting minutes were heavily redacted, the initials MM remained clearly visible in the discussion section, addressing unauthorized foreign digital intrusion targeting royal minors. Tensions escalated to an extreme level when leaked internal messages revealed that aides were no longer using the term PR incident. Instead, they adopted a far more severe designation: espionage. This keyword trended for a full 7 hours, thrusting the name Meghan into the center of suspicions that extend far beyond the boundaries of mere entertainment. According to rapidly spreading chatter across closed military forums, a startling hypothesis has emerged. Could this figure have been operating within the gray zone of a passive surveillance process for as long as 3 weeks before the story broke? Some images allegedly leaked from authorities, though still unverified, have even hinted that she was classified as a person of interest in connection with security protocols protecting royal minors. While variable M1 stands at the eye of the storm of suspicion, variable H. Prince Harry has been making a series of deeply perplexing moves. He completely vanished from the U.S. media radar, only to be unexpectedly seen quietly boarding a private flight to Zurich, Switzerland. No wife, no children, no royal security detail. Insiders are asking the obvious question: why Zurich, the global hub of discreet financial dealings? Is he searching for a safe financial harbor or secretly negotiating an exit strategy after realizing that a legal storm may be about to crash down on his wife? What do you think this solo trip represents, a flight or a search for allies? Leave your speculation in the comments below. The answer may lie within that royal briefcase. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment of truth has arrived. Allegedly irrefutable digital evidence has surfaced, signaling an end to all denials. Media reports claim that a chain of emails was decrypted from the inbox of a close aide and traced back to an IP address in Los Angeles, widely known as the base of operations for Subject M1's security team. The email content is said to confirm a chilling assertion: access links to Charlotte's school data archive were approved from an external source. But the most shocking plot twist in the history of royal security has now emerged. The aide chose a side. Instead of continuing to conceal the truth, this individual is reportedly coming clean, agreeing to become a whistleblower in exchange for protection. Leaked information suggests that this key witness has now been placed under MI6's Special Protection Program. The fact that a foreign intelligence service has successfully penetrated Meghan's inner circle signals that this is no longer a private family matter. Public opinion has shifted irreversibly. Even major U.S. media outlets, such as CNN, have begun to change their tone. They no longer frame this as celebrity drama, but are instead questioning a potential national security risk strategy. In response, an unprecedented meeting, unseen since the era of Princess Diana, was convened between senior members of the royal family and British intelligence leadership. A decision was made immediately to activate the double guard protocol for Princess Charlotte. The situation grew even more ominous when a July 13th memo revealed that social engineering attacks originating from California-based IP addresses continued even after the aide defected. This development forced intelligence officials to reinstate the codename Operation Ivy. Subject M1 is now no longer viewed merely as a political irritant, but has been reclassified as a systemic threat to institutional stability. Prince William has officially elevated the crisis to the diplomatic level by convening an emergency meeting with the UK Prime Minister. The message being sent is unmistakably clear. This is a coordinated effort to undermine the monarchy from across the Atlantic. The contrast between the two sides of this divide has never been sharper. In the United States, Meghan is seen in Montecito surrounded by private security forces, reportedly linked to former NSA personnel, an image defined by defensiveness and isolation. In stark contrast, Kate Middleton appears at the United Nations, delivering a flawless address that projects resilience and the soft power of a future queen. Ladies and gentlemen, based on the rapid developments we have just witnessed, strategic analysts broadly agree on one conclusion. Meghan Markle's personal brand and political credibility have suffered a permanent structural fracture. This is not an injury that can be repaired through PR campaigns or self-produced documentaries. As for the palace, while the surface appears as calm as still water, the subtle signals being sent suggest that their response operation is far from over. Once the red line concerning child security was crossed, the rules of the royal family changed completely. The silence from Buckingham Palace at this moment is not a sign of weakness, but the calm before a tsunami. Can Meghan Markle turn the tide, or will the M1 file mark the end of her Hollywood ambitions? The answer may well lie in the hands of the FBI disclaimer. This video is compiled based on hypotheses and rumors for analytical and entertainment purposes only. Which side are you on in this royal power struggle? Press 1 if you support the decisive stance of the British royal family. Press 0 if you still believe in the innocence of the Sussex household. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the latest developments. Among elite observers that the succession mechanism at Kensington does not operate merely on a simple when the time comes basis, but is instead governed by an emergency brake system. As a royal figure approaches the milestone age of 40, triggering the activation of a massive trust fund from the past, we might assume this to be an automatic process. But no. For a long time, the public has been swept up in media sparring, yet according to our analysis, the true tip of the iceberg lies in the flow of finances. The hypothesis raised here is this. Does an older brother acting as the future guardian of the system have the right to intervene in the flow of a younger brother's assets on the basis of moral standards? There are indications that a strategy referred to as a localized asset freeze is being considered. Rather than impulsive outbursts of anger, this appears to be a cold, calculated move grounded in a doctrine of preserving honor. The core argument placed on the scales is this: when a member breaks away from the system's shared orbit, do they retain the same privilege of drawing upon that system's resources? To truly understand this legal machine, we must look away from the headlines and step into the imagined space of the muniment room, the repository of memory and highly classified documents. According to analytical data on aristocratic customs, the key to this matter does not lie in existing law, but in a more abstract concept, the letter of wishes. A handwritten document from 1993 is now regarded as the most critical variable. For 3 decades, it was merely a sheet of paper resting silently in the archives. Today, however, amid shifts in family structure, this document has suddenly become a legal shield. Our hypothesis is this: the document does not merely govern money, it establishes a moral filter. Can a handwritten piece of paper from 30 years ago truly have the power to halt the flow of millions of dollars? That is the million-dollar question we need to answer. If you appreciate our approach of hypothesis and analysis rather than baseless rumors, leave a comment saying agreed and share this video with friends who share a passion for uncovering the truth. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because the most unexpected variables have yet to be revealed. Its contents, though never officially made public, are believed to enshrine an unbreakable principle of the late mother: wealth must serve the well-being of her children, yet at the same time function as a resource to protect and uphold the dignity of the family. So what happens when these two objectives, individual interest and family honor, move in opposite directions? In your view, within a system that places such high value on tradition, can a handwritten spiritual testament truly possess enough power to override rigid financial rules? Or is this merely the opening move in a broader redefinition of inheritance itself? For many years, the working assumption of the one who departed rested on what was considered an absolutely safe variable, that the flow of finances from the maternal bloodline was untouchable, entirely separate from the royal family. He believed that biological status, being Diana's son, would always outrank political status. However, a sharp counterargument is now being actively debated. On the side of the heir to the throne, William, there appears to be a deliberate effort to redefine the concept of entitlement. The reasoning here is not emotional, but rooted in asset management logic, the purpose of the capital itself. If the 1993 letter is treated as the constitution of the trust, then it contains a brutal paradox the system is now forced to confront. The original intent of the bequest was to provide resources for independence and security. Yet in today's reality, that very flow of capital is suspected of being used to finance a media machine that turns back and attacks the very foundation that created it. This is what analysts describe as the self-destruction paradox, using a mother's legacy to pay lawyers and PR teams in a campaign that erodes the honor of her own family. In the eyes of the system's managers, this is no longer about purchasing a house, but about financing a confrontational campaign. A common counter-question is often raised: is this simply greed? Publicly available financial data suggests the answer is no. As Prince of Wales, William's income and assets far exceed any personal needs. Therefore, this move to freeze assets is not economic in nature, but instead reflects a strategy of protecting the legacy brand. The system's greatest fear is not the loss of money, but the commodification of pain. The transfer of physical assets, potentially including priceless personal mementos, to a location beyond direct oversight in California, carries the risk of their becoming mere props for entertainment products on digital platforms. William, in his role as guardian, is sending a powerful signal: sacred legacy cannot be collateral for Hollywood. To decode the next move, we must shift our geographic coordinates, leaving London for Althorp, the ancestral seat of the Spencer family. There, a third figure stands at the center of the storm, the 9th Earl Spencer. Consider the extraordinarily complex position of this figure. In 1997, he was the one who made a historic vow before the world to protect both nephews from being consumed by the royal institution. But nearly 30 years later, that promise has turned into a diplomatic curse. He is no longer merely an uncle. He has become the last remaining buffer zone. Well-informed sources suggest that the mode of communication from the royal side has shifted, no longer framed as family appeals, but as institutional pressure. The implicit message sent to Althorp carries more political weight than familial warmth. It is a demand for the synchronization of loyalty. The logic William's side presents to his uncle is cold, yet difficult to refute. How can he protect his sister's legacy if he continues to fund activities that actively harm that very legacy? The argument from the heir to the throne. William is rooted more in military logic than in family sentiment. If an estimated $10 million in assets were to be released, at this moment it would not simply be a birthday gift. In the system's eyes, this would amount to funding the counterforce. The media apparatus the younger brother is building is no longer viewed as a peripheral nuisance, but has been identified as a competing entity, actively eroding the credibility of the very institution William is destined to lead. Consequently, any flow of money from Althorp to California at this moment would be regarded as fuel for the next wave of attack. Earl Spencer now finds himself trapped at a brutal strategic crossroads. A subtle yet weighty implicit message has been delivered. Will he choose to stand with the stability of the crown or lend strength to an unstable variable? The Earl now faces a profound moral paradox. On one side lies the oath of blood, a commitment to protect the most vulnerable of his nephews. If he locks the vault, he risks becoming the villain in the next chapter of history, accused of betraying the wishes of his late sister. But on the other side stands political reality. William holds the power of the future. Defying the direction of the crown could lead to social isolation for the entire Spencer line. So what is the technical solution here? This is where we must understand a specialized financial mechanism of the aristocracy, the discretionary hold. The audience needs to understand that these trusts do not operate like an ATM. The trustees hold an emergency brake. Technically and legally, they have the authority to suspend distributions if they determine that the beneficiary is in a state of instability. In the past, this has applied to cases of bankruptcy or loss of behavioral control. But today, legal teams are expanding that definition. They argue that the beneficiary is operating under the influence of external hostile actors. A case file is being assembled to legitimize a carefully phrased answer, "not at this time." This is not confiscation, but a protective, temporary lock. Pressure at Althorpe is reaching a breaking point. Two ends of the phone line, two opposing poles of power and rebellion, are both awaiting a decision. One side demands a freeze, the other demands liquidity. And the man in the middle understands one thing clearly: whichever choice he makes will constitute a breach of trust. However, William's move does not stop at internal pressure alone. Analysts suggest that the true force driving this hardline stance is a darker fear, one that extends far beyond Britain's borders. It is the scenario of a jurisdictional clash with courts in California, where royal secrets could be exposed in their most raw and unfiltered form. While the English countryside holds its breath, the real fuse is quietly smoldering 5,000 miles away. To outside observers, freezing the flow of money may look like a punitive move driven by personal motives. However, sources with deep insight into royal strategy point to a critical psychological shift. The motivation has moved from emotional anger to legal fear. On the desks of key decision-makers, a new file labeled California Jurisdiction Risk is being closely scrutinized. The real concern is not the heir's ability to spend money, but the asset permeation mechanisms inherent in the place where he now resides. We must remember one key technical factor. California is a jurisdiction that applies an exceptionally strict community property regime. This is precisely the technical trap that advisors are warning about. Top-tier lawyers have advanced a chilling hypothesis in asset management: the concept of commingling. Their argument is razor-sharp. Once inherited assets, whether cash or priceless heirlooms, cross the Atlantic and are deposited into shared household accounts or used to renovate jointly owned property, they lose their exempt status. At that point, legally speaking, it would no longer be the private property of the Spencer line. It would be transformed into marital property. And it is precisely this transformation that fuels the sleepless nights of legacy guardians in Britain. A professional risk manager never operates on faith in the permanence of love, but must plan for the worst-case scenario, the dissolution of a partnership. No matter how firmly the principles assert stability, the system itself is not permitted the luxury of optimism. If an asset division were to take place under the ruling of a Los Angeles court, the 50-50 rule could be triggered. Imagine a scenario in which historically significant emeralds or funds reserved exclusively for royal bloodlines are compelled to be transferred to an external entity. as part of a divorce settlement. For the future head of the monarchy, this is not about losing money. It is an irreversible leakage of legacy. It is an apocalyptic vision in which family history becomes collateral on a negotiating table in America. This is a fear that is instinctive, reaching far beyond the scale of palaces. Whether it is a national treasure or simply an old family photo album, the desire to protect what our ancestors left behind and to ensure it is passed on to the right hands is entirely legitimate. I hope you and your families are safe and able to preserve your own core values. Our community is growing every day. Let me know in the comments which city or country you're following this story from. Is the concept of inheritance where you live viewed differently? Returning to the strategic chessboard. To neutralize this California trap, a complex legal maneuver is being pushed forward known as a protective trust variation. This is Plan B. If persuasion through emotion fails, the system will alter the distribution structure itself. The objective is no longer outright prevention, but a redefinition of ownership. Funds may be spent, but permanent control will never leave London. Could this protective trust variation be the comprehensive solution, allowing the elder brother to safeguard the legacy while the younger still receives support without being entangled? Or will this mark the beginning of an unprecedented transcontinental legal battle in royal history? Time will provide the most accurate answer. Instead of a direct wire transfer to Montecito, a far more intricate financial structure is now being put in place, a UK-based frozen subtrust. This is not expropriation, but a restructuring of ownership. The mechanism functions like a one-way valve. The beneficiary, Harry, would still retain the right to receive generated returns, passive income, that could be used, for example, to fund the education of the next generation. However, the principal and physical assets, such as historic jewelry, would remain permanently behind a legal firewall. The implicit message of this structure is unmistakable. You may benefit from the legacy, but you may not liquidate it. It entirely removes the risk of assets being sold off or becoming subjects of civil litigation in the United States. This strategy elevates the issue from an internal family dispute to a high-level corporate risk management problem. Technically speaking, London is issuing an expert judgment on its own CAPA. They argue that the beneficiary's current legal environment is not sufficiently secure to safeguard national assets. The objective is to construct a legal fortress around the memory of the late mother. All assets must remain on British soil, be governed by British law, and be placed entirely beyond the reach of California judges. As this fortress is being reinforced, the position of those outside the walls begins to resemble an economic siege. If moral negotiations fail, legal experts point to the existence of a Plan B, a move that is cold but constitutionally sound. That is the activation of the Protective Trust Variation Clause. Under normal circumstances, the distribution process at age 40 is automatic. The beneficiary has full discretion to invest, spend, or even squander the funds. However, a new legal argument is now being advanced, grounded in the principle of exception due to circumstances. Under this mechanism, nominal ownership would remain with Harry to avoid violating the will, but actual control would be completely separated. The $10 million inheritance would never leave London. It would be locked inside a digital vault managed by trustees loyal to the crown. What we are witnessing is a William acting not out of emotion, but out of concern for the survival of the system. But the question remains, where is the line between protection and expropriation? What do you see in this powerful figure? Leave a comment with the number 2 if you view this as tough love, a necessary action to prevent money from flowing into outside hands. Leave a comment with the number 5 if you see it as the cruelty of power, an economic punishment aimed at a weaker brother. The judgment is yours. Hit like to support the editorial team and subscribe to the channel now. We'll be back with classified files that have never been made public. This represents the pinnacle of soft power strategy. The beneficiary may receive an annual allowance drawn from interest sufficient to cover basic living expenses, but the vast sums required to sustain a high-security lifestyle and service large real estate mortgages would remain out of reach. By framing the action as a protective measure, the guardian William effectively arms himself with a shield of immunity against accusations of greed. The final argument placed before asset managers is not emotional, but a brutal financial forecast. If the full principal is released right now, the current burn rate projects that the entire legacy will evaporate within 36 months. We are holding the money not to seize it, but to ensure it survives for the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the future. The case from London is constructed on a cold balance sheet at the present level of spending on private security, prolonged litigation, and public image operations. The $10 million fund is projected to disappear rapidly. The guardian's task, William, is no longer to placate his brother, but to enforce the duty of intergenerational capital preservation. The ultimate objective is to ensure that this pool of assets remains intact when the next generation, Archie and Lilibet, comes of age. This is an exceptionally shrewd communications move. It positions William as a visionary steward, while implicitly casting the Duke of Sussex as a high-risk investor, insufficiently equipped to manage the family legacy. Now imagine the psychological shock through the lens of game theory. Harry left the United Kingdom in search of absolute autonomy and escape from the control of the royal administrative apparatus. But if this protective trust mechanism is activated, he would be trapped in a bitter paradox, a 40-year-old man who, in operational financial terms, is supervised like a minor. This mechanism demands absolute transparency. Funds require receipts, spending requires justification. The trustees would become the filtering mechanism, and indirectly, they would report back to the head of the system. The implicit message is clear. You may leave the system, but the system's resources will not be used to finance opposition to it. Moreover, this strategy neutralizes every potential media attack. If Harry were to claim he has been stripped of his inheritance, William would have a legally impeccable response. The money hasn't gone anywhere. It is still there, completely secure, waiting for your children. This pushes Harry into a state of stalemate. For a Montecito elite lifestyle with operating costs estimated at millions of dollars per year, a frozen trust is as useless as an empty one. You can't pay a security team with projected interest. You can't settle legal bills with future promises. This is a cash flow problem. William is playing a long, strategic game, a war of attrition. He understands that his opponent does not have the time or the financial endurance to pursue a decades-long legal battle before the UK Supreme Court. To grasp why this valve-shutting move has sent shockwaves through California, we need to look at the macro-financial picture of the Sussex brand. Analysts assess that it is entering a state of severe income-expenditure imbalance. For years, Harry operated under the assumption of a permanent safety cushion provided by the Spencer inheritance. That was the final strategic reserve the royal family could not interfere with. But once that cushion is removed, a stark reality is exposed. The business outlook over the past 12 months has taken a negative turn. The $20 million Spotify deal ended in a very public rupture over performance issues. The Netflix partnership is now under heavy pressure to deliver commercially successful content, something that has yet to be achieved with any consistency. The era of easy money earned from celebrity status in Hollywood is drawing to a close, while fixed costs remain unchanged, most notably the massive mortgage on the Riven Rock estate. When we strip away the glossy veneer of private jets and a large entourage of aides, we arrive at the biggest iceberg in the Sussex financial statement's security costs. Since losing the protective umbrella of the state once funded by taxpayers, Harry has been forced to operate a private secret service of a scale comparable to that of a head of state. Experts estimate these costs at between $2 and $3 million per year. This is an enormous fixed expense, one capable of eroding any fortune if fresh cash flow is not continuously injected. Without a stable inheritance stream acting as an anchor, Harry is facing an existential crisis. He is now entirely dependent on the market value of attention in Hollywood. And as any risk manager will tell you, the market is a profoundly fickle friend. This liquidity pressure is producing a psychological state that observers describe as a siege mentality. From the insider's perspective, the moves coming out of London no longer look like protection, but like a systematic campaign of position neutralization. Look at the historical sequence. First came the removal of military titles, loss of hard power. Then the stripping of the HRH-style loss of soft power. Next was the loss of Frogmore Cottage, loss of geographic footing. And now, the system is targeting the final remaining link, the financial legacy left by his mother. The disparity in resources is staggering. One side controls the Duchy of Cornwall with effectively limitless resources, palaces, and treasuries. The other holds a massive mortgage and a podcast channel. For Harry, this is a brutal asymmetry. As the traditional doors at Althorp show signs of closing, the strategy has shifted. Intelligence sources indicate that an effort to activate auxiliary networks is now underway. Rather than confronting the guardian, Earl Spencer, or the enforcer, William, head-on, Harry is reportedly attempting to establish contact with the emotional wing of the Spencer family figures, such as Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Baroness Jane Fellows. The objective is to seek an internal alliance among those who still carry living memories of Diana's desire for freedom in order to apply pressure on the management mechanism. However, this scenario is giving rise to a tragic paradox. William seeks to freeze assets to prevent the commercialization of the family. Yet it is precisely this act of shutting off the money valve that may end up accelerating that very process. If the Spencer financial anchor is severed and the American dream turns into a liquidity nightmare, the Sussex couple would be pushed into a corner. To maintain their security apparatus and service their debts, they would be forced to exploit the only asset they have left: information. They would have to write more books, sell more previously undisclosed secrets, produce more shocking reality-based television content. Ironically, William's very act of financial containment could become the survival pressure that compels the other side to sell everything. As the mist settles over the Althorp estate, it becomes clear that this is no longer merely a dispute over money. It is a systemic tragedy in which the very effort to protect a legacy is triggering the mechanisms that may ultimately destroy it. The battle for control of the Spencer treasury teaches us a brutal yet necessary lesson about the law of cause and effect in economics. One of the fundamental principles of game theory is this: you cannot destroy the bridge between two opposing shores and still expect supply convoys to keep crossing it. For many years, the younger brother built his brand around the concept of freedom, freedom from the system, freedom from media scrutiny, and freedom from traditional rules. Yet it seems a critical variable was overlooked in this equation. True freedom always comes with a massive depreciation cost. You cannot spend 4 years dismantling the very foundation of your own privilege and then act surprised when the benefits tied to that foundation are deactivated. Through the analytical lens of this channel, William's actions do not stem from personal malice, but from the inevitability of the institution. He is carrying out a form of risk management that can best be described as tough love. He is drawing an inviolable red line. The memory and legacy of his late mother are cultural values, not derivative commodities to be traded for fame in Hollywood. Decision-makers in London recognize that if a shut-off valve is not installed immediately, the history of the Spencer family risks becoming raw material for the next season of a reality television series. Today, William appears to have accepted a strategic trade-off. He is willing to play the villain in his brother's contemporary memoir so that he can remain the guardian in the historical chronicle of Diana. Before we close this file, please note this content is purely for reference based on hypotheses and unverified public speculation. Join our review panel right here, type 1 in the comments if your curiosity has been sparked and you want us to continue digging into these shadow financial files. Type 0 if you have sharper counter-arguments regarding the royal family's strategic moves. Every like and subscribe is the energy that allows us to continue lifting the velvet curtain of mystery. Don't forget to turn on notifications because the truth always waits for the most patient. Goodbye, and see you in the next investigation. Is a soft coup unfolding behind the velvet curtains of Buckingham Palace. Insider whispers speak of a quiet alliance between Princess Anne and Princess Kate aimed at repositioning or, more bluntly, isolating Queen Camilla. The royal legacy does not tolerate dilution. And when the gatekeepers begin to move, this is not petty rivalry, but a self-defense mechanism of an entire institution. So what is really happening? Let's decode it together. It was once an abstract concept, but at Buckingham right now it carries immense weight, heavy enough to crush individual egos and reshape an entire reign. Why is a system built on continuity suddenly showing such deep fractures? Are we witnessing a transition or a form of natural elimination? This analysis is based on public sentiment, body language, and theories circulating within the royal watching community and has not been officially confirmed. We are discussing this objectively. The memory file of the late Diana is being reopened. The coldness of Anne or Kate is not a momentary emotion, it is a defensive reaction of a system that eliminates what it deems illegitimate. It may be the system's self-protective response to what it considers incompatible with the standards of the throne. But on this chessboard of the century, who is the one commanding the game and who is merely a pawn to decode the present? We are compelled to look into the mirror of the past. But is Kate truly acting alone? In a world governed by rules, no move made by the Princess of Wales is without the consent of the man at the top of the line of succession, Prince William. Sources leaking from Kensington Palace suggest that William maintains a polite but cold distance from his stepmother. To William, Camilla remains a permanent reminder of the years of suffering endured by his mother Diana. If Kate is the one carrying out the rituals of isolation on the public stage, then William is the one approving that strategy behind closed doors. Imagine a chessboard where the King Charles is trying to protect the Queen Camilla, while the Rook and the Bishop William and Kate are quietly closing in to prepare for a new reign, a reign they want to be completely cleansed of past controversies. This is not merely a family conflict, it is the preparation for the cleanest possible transfer of power. The palace has never been a place of just tea parties and roses. It is a grand stage of perfectly managed appearances, where the undercurrents of power collide with brutal force. The history of Buckingham Palace is no stranger to purges of power from the days of Henry VIII to the present. But why, in the 21st century, does the question of Camilla's legitimacy still provoke figures like Princess Anne to such determination? The answer lies not in the past, but in the future of the crown. Never underestimate the power of the men in gray, the private secretaries and senior advisors who keep the royal machine running. Why would they allow these rumors to spread? Never underestimate the power of the men in gray, the private secretaries and senior advisors who operate the royal machine. So why let the rumors circulate? The objective is clear: to protect the symbolic authority of the crown. If the public begins to view the royal family as a long-running soap opera, its dignity erodes. Therefore, repositioning Camilla into a more subdued role becomes a way to excise a troublesome tumor and restore the calm that Buckingham Palace deems necessary. So, if history is riddled with blemishes, why has the case of the current queen become the focal point of such harsh scrutiny from within the institution itself, specifically from what is believed to be Princess Anne's perspective? Perhaps the issue lies not only in the past, but in the very definition of legitimacy. Before we delve deeper into an examination of these fractures, let us reset the context of the broader picture. Caught between ironclad rules and human emotion, is a position ever permanently secured by a title alone, or does it require the consent of the gatekeepers of history? What do you think about the real power operating behind those closed doors? We need to acknowledge a fundamental reality: the perfection of the royal family is by nature a triumph of image management. Yet behind the programmed smiles and the choreographed waves, history has shown that the palace has always been a miniature geopolitical hotspot of ambition and conflict. This is not a new phenomenon of our time. It is a genetic code passed down through generations. From royal succession rivalries recorded in history books to whispered conversations in dark corridors, drama is not a system flaw. It appears to be a feature of life at the very top. This variable hangs over King Charles and the entire family structure. The public, acting as observers, is placing the whole system under a microscope. Every fleeting glance, a furrowed brow, or a physical distance between family members is decoded as an SOS signal. It is this very scrutiny that fuels an endless spiral of speculation about hidden alliances and internal fractures. If the royal family is viewed as a machine, then the emergence of Camilla and later the separation of Harry and Meghan represent its most severe stress tests. Their departure and the statements issued from across the ocean inadvertently activated internal pressures, making the effort to maintain a glossy exterior more difficult than ever. Yet what is truly astonishing is the family's ability to freeze their emotions in public. But do not let that stillness deceive you. Analysts suggest that the real fracture does not lie in the external noise, but in the very foundation itself. And the epicenter of this latest seismic shift is believed to revolve around Princess Anne. This conflict goes beyond ordinary differences of opinion. It is existential to the future direction of the monarchy. According to prevailing theories, Princess Anne, often described as the royal family's iron arm, appears to have delivered an assessment, or rather a blunt warning, regarding Camilla's position. This is not personal jealousy, but a matter of principle. There is information suggesting that Anne pointed out a fundamental truth, one core factor that led her to believe Camilla's presence at the very top violates a sacred, unwritten rule, that she represents something fundamentally at odds with it. Could Princess Anne's warning be the final safeguard protecting the dynasty's legacy? Or is it the spark for a brutal transfer of power in the battle between traditional duty and a new reality? Who truly holds the soul of the monarchy? Leave your reasoning below. In systems management theory, when an external factor is perceived as a threat to core stability, the system's self-defense mechanisms are triggered. The chaotic developments we are witnessing at Buckingham Palace may in fact be the convulsions of a process of natural elimination within the power structure. Too many variables are operating beneath the surface, making outside observers feel as though they are lost in a labyrinth. Yet, when the data points are connected, a common pattern begins to emerge: the gradual isolation of the Queen Consort's position. Has the conclusion to reposition Camilla's role already been reached behind closed doors? Internal resistance to Camilla's status is not surprising when viewed against the trajectory of her rise. What is striking, however, is the scale of this undercurrent and the figures involved. We are talking about Princess Anne and Princess Kate. In the psychological profiles of the royal family, these two are consistently classified as the stabilizers. They embody duty, responsibility, and a near-absolute commitment to staying within the established rails of tradition. Princess Kate, in particular, has always been seen as a model of quiet perfection. So why are these exemplary guardians of the temple believed to be behind a campaign to restore order at the palace? When even the most moderate figures begin to act, it is a signal that the system has reached a red line. To understand their motives, we must return to a core concept: tradition. For the British monarchy, tradition is not merely habit, it is the only operating system that confers legitimacy. It is the invisible thread that connects the present to centuries of history. Adhering to protocol is how they merge into the endless current of kings and queens who came before them. It is how they tell the world, we are the guardians of identity. If this thread is severed or diluted by elements deemed incompatible, the monarchy loses its sense of the sacred and faces the risk of an identity collapse. And it was precisely at this sensitive crossroads that a symbolic event occurred, one that shook the ancient walls of the palace. It was a moment of silence, yet its echo was louder than any declaration. Recently, there have been moments that the public has scrutinized closely, especially during official events. For example, at the reception welcoming the German delegation in December 2025, Princess Kate performed a graceful and natural double curtsy once to King Charles and immediately afterward to Queen Camilla. The cameras clearly captured the scene. She smiled, exchanged warm greetings, and Camilla even responded with an air kiss. It was a gesture of courtesy, expressing respect fully in accordance with protocol. However, public opinion still tends to analyze smaller moments from earlier occasions, such as slightly more restrained greeting gestures at past events, for example the 2023 coronation, where some observers sensed a departure from strict traditional norms. Even so, body language experts note that these subtle variations may simply reflect natural adaptation to context rather than signaling any form of resistance. Having spent more than a decade mastering royal protocol, Kate's every gesture is typically carefully considered. So when we observe a combination of public deference and more relaxed moments, could this be a sign of a royal family gradually modernizing, preserving tradition while becoming more flexible in its communication? Or is it simply a diversity of ways in which respect can be expressed? This subtle transgression, if we may call it that, seems to stem from a historical wound that never truly healed. It leads us to a haunting hypothesis, one that the public, and perhaps even members of the royal family themselves, have long wondered about: the alternative scenario. If the variable named Diana had remained as queen, would the current power structure have fractured so deeply? Could the turmoil, Prince Harry's departure, and the fratricidal tensions between brothers be the direct consequences of an uneasy replacement? Many analysts argue that Princess Kate's perceived coolness is in fact a reflection of a collective psyche. It represents the quiet resistance of those who believe that Queen Camilla's path to the throne lacks one crucial element: the consent of the heart. To fully decode the princess's actions, we must place her in the correct position: a future queen, a queen consort in waiting. She is not merely a family member, but the blueprint for the next reign. In the theory of royal governance, the individual must always sacrifice personal ego to protect the constitutional order. Yet, we cannot rule out a broader, more macro-level hypothesis. Perhaps this is not an act of defiance at all, but rather a signal of a comprehensive software update unfolding under King Charles's reign. The king's ultimate goal is to bring the heavy chariot of the monarchy up to the speed of the 21st century. In the course of this restructuring, rituals rooted in submission, such as formal bowing, may be gradually pared back to make room for greater equality and a more modern sensibility. The public's reaction is the most intriguing variable in this equation. In an era that prizes authenticity, what is perceived as Kate's rebellion has inadvertently created a peculiar allure. It demonstrates that members of the royal family are not merely historical puppets pulled along by obsolete rules. They are independent thinkers willing to redefine what truly constitutes core values. Yet the paradox remains. For conservatives, bowing rituals are not mere pageantry. They are the skeletal framework that keeps the body of the monarchy upright. If formality and structure are stripped away, can the royal family still retain its sense of the sacred and its distinction from ordinary celebrities? So in your view, are Kate's actions a step forward for freedom? Or do they risk diluting traditional values? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video insightful, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming in-depth analyses. We need to understand that on the royal chessboard, protocol is not merely about personal respect. It is the steel framework that keeps the historic castle from collapsing under the storms of time. Princess Anne has long been known as one of the most devoted and steadfastly traditional members of the royal family. She embodies austerity, responsibility, and an unwavering prioritization of duty, qualities that the British public holds in particularly high regard. According to a YouGov survey in early 2026, she continues to maintain a consistently high favorability rating of around 70%. In a period when the monarchy is facing profound change, from the king's health to the challenge of adapting to the 21st century, many have speculated about Princess Anne's role as a guardian of standards. She is often likened to a protector of Queen Elizabeth II's legacy, emphasizing continuity, ritual, and humility before the public. The relationship between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla has been closely observed. While there have been rumors of differing perspectives, with some sources suggesting that Anne favors stricter adherence to tradition, recent events have instead projected an image of unity. A clear example was Christmas 2025 at Sandringham. The two women appeared together wearing coordinated red outfits, leading the family to church, a gesture many newspapers described as a symbol of unity between the two most influential women in the royal family. Of course, the monarchy does not make everything public. There may well be internal discussions about how to balance immutable tradition with necessary adaptation, especially when Camilla represents a more modern, approachable style. But rather than open conflict, the system appears to be self-correcting. Anne continues her role as the quiet workhorse, carrying out hundreds of engagements each year, while Camilla remains at the king's side during major public events. This leads to a key question in the balance between preserving heritage and embracing renewal. What does Princess Anne truly represent? A force that holds the core firmly in place, or an integral part of a smooth, carefully managed transition? What's your take? She fears that accepting these looser standards would send the wrong message that the monarchy is lowering itself in order to compromise. Returning to the historic moment of the coronation, while the world saw crowns and robes, more discerning observers sensed a subtle discord in the atmosphere. The whispers there were not mere social pleasantries, but tremors of an underlying collision. For Princess Anne, the issue has moved far beyond questions of protocol or even generational differences, as in the case of Princess Kate. This is a deeply personal and historical issue. She has witnessed the entire chronicle of the complex emotional relationship between King Charles and Camilla, and now, from the perspective of a guardian of legacy, she fears that the immutable principles of the monarchy are being privatized by personal emotion. A psychological hypothesis emerges. Princess Anne believes she has inherited the spiritual will of Queen Elizabeth II, the responsibility to prevent the erosion of standards. She thus becomes a counterbalancing force to the soft influence that Queen Camilla is exerting over the king. Anne's steadfastness is revealed in a small yet enormously symbolic detail: resistance at the level of titles. Her insistence on using the term queen consort rather than simply queen is not linguistic stubbornness. It is a political boundary Anne draws to underscore the limits of power that the position derives from marriage, not from divine right or bloodline succession. And then the story turns to a new, more mysterious chapter: absence. Camilla's absence, attributed to a respiratory infection. But in courtly language, illness can sometimes be a euphemism for a temporary pause in power, a cooling-off period to calm heated minds. At the center of the storm, where does King Charles III stand? On one side is his lifelong, deeply rooted love for Camilla. On the other is his absolute loyalty to duty and his profound respect for his sister, Princess Anne. Royal psychological analysts suggest that Charles is facing the most acute dilemma of his life. He understands that if he defends Camilla too forcefully, he risks provoking resistance from his most devoted allies, figures like Anne and Kate. But if he lets go, he would be betraying the woman who stood by him through decades of being shunned by the world. Could Camilla's absence then be a painful compromise that Charles was forced to accept in order to keep the family from fracturing? A king who reigns over a kingdom yet cannot secure peace within his own palace. This may be the greatest tragedy of Charles III's reign. However, in the language of the court, health is sometimes the perfect screen behind which political temperature adjustments quietly take place. Systems analysts raise the question: is this merely a medical issue or a strategic pause, a necessary step back to cool internal tensions that had escalated to a breaking point, especially following firm signals from Princess Anne? If the hypothesis of a temporary suspension of power holds true, then this could be seen as a self-defense mechanism of the monarchy itself. The system is self-adjusting to ensure that the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II remains the sole guiding compass. Camilla's absence, whatever the reason, has inadvertently restored space for traditional values to shine. The final decision of Buckingham Palace is not about any single individual, but about the survival of a symbol. It is a choice between yielding to present emotions or safeguarding timeless majesty. In your view, is this withdrawal a sign of concession, or the overture to a new order established by loyal guardians of the temple? The British monarchy has always known how to survive storms, and this time is no exception. This content is purely for reference based on unverified hypotheses and public speculation. We invite discussion from an objective analytical perspective. Don't just sit back and observe, become part of the court of public opinion. If you believe Princess Anne and Kate are right to defend tradition, comment 1. If, on the other hand, you believe the monarchy needs renewal and greater empathy, comment 0. Hit like if you appreciate this style of analysis and subscribe to join us as we continue to decode the next mysteries of power. Thank you, and see you reverberate like thunder through the ancient corridors of power. Imagine a scenario where millennia-old protocols are overturned. In this hypothetical model, the position of the person beside the throne, a seemingly untouchable position, suddenly becomes a variable to be discarded. The head of the monarchy, with a somber yet sharp tone like a surgical knife, made a decisive move to protect the system's survival. In that tense atmosphere, body language spoke louder than 1,000 words. The heir to the throne and his partner, representatives of the system's future, unconsciously clasped hands. It was not just a handshake, but the forging of a new alliance in the face of the collapse of the old order. They understood that when a major piece moved, the chessboard was forever changed. But what motivation could have triggered such a fierce defense mechanism from someone who had patiently waited for 7 decades? What lay behind the velvet curtain of diplomatic protocol? The answer probably doesn't lie on the surface, but deep within the black box of court intrigues, top-secret biological records, and a communication signal that inadvertently exposed it all. Before we unravel the earthquake simmering within the Commonwealth, let's reflect on a fundamental psychological principle. Have you ever placed complete trust in an alliance, only to discover that within that very security lies a fatal vulnerability? That is the essence of the tragedy we are dissecting. This is not simply a family story. It is a lesson in risk management, manipulation, and the price to pay when a power gamble fails. The data trails lead us to 2 sensitive files: encrypted communication protocols used overnight and an invisible link stretching from London to the other side of the ocean. Stay focused, because the picture we are about to piece together will completely change how you perceive the workings of a modern institution. Let's return to the eye of the storm. A moment that could send the internet into a frenzy and plunge global public opinion into a thoughtful silence. Under the harsh glare of the media, the leader emerges. Despite bearing the marks of a prolonged internal biological battle, the aura of rulership never wavered. The shadow on his face was not merely a matter of lighting, but the weight of a declaration about to be made. A declaration meant to rebuild order from the ashes of betrayal. Do you believe a powerful empire can collapse because of a single breach of trust? Let me know your thoughts below. And don't just observe, join this investigation by subscribing and turning on notifications. The evidence about to be revealed will completely change the way you see everything. That voice, the sound of a man who had spent his entire life operating the machinery of monarchy, rang out. But this time, the command was not issued to preserve, but to terminate. I abdicate. Those 2 words, like a deactivation kill code, instantly threw the entire media system into overload. Cameras trembled, and chaos erupted in silence as millions of mobile devices vibrated simultaneously. This was not a repetition of Edward VIII's abdication for love. This was a rupture in the very process of succession itself. But the script did not end there. A master strategist always saves the most decisive move for the final moment. The leader's gaze shifted, cold as tempered steel, locking onto the figure standing in the position of queen. Clad in an emerald ceremonial gown, a symbol of royal stability and composure, she was awaiting a smooth transfer of power to the next generation. She had prepared herself for the role of a dignified supporter, but the system did not execute according to that programming. What followed was a direct attack on the existing power structure, stripping away all titles and privileges. The entire room reeled. Even those trained in emotional control, like the young heir, couldn't hide their shock at this sudden shift in course. The accusation wasn't about sentiment, but about a serious violation of data integrity. The hypothesis here is a high-level manipulation conspiracy, interfering with biometric records and manipulating medical diagnoses to control the leader when they are at their weakest. It's a usurpation of power based on information asymmetry. Rewind that video to analyze the body language where the truth is revealed. The moment the perfect facade is shattered. Not mere fear, but a reality denial. The wide-open eyes reflect the collapse of an intellect that had calculated every move, every risk, every contingency. Except one thing. The variable came from the very person she believed she had complete control over. Try putting yourself in the mindset of a master manipulator. How much coldness and meticulous calculation does it take to rewrite a spouse's life record while they are struggling for survival? What motivation is strong enough to drive a person across that crimson line? The press conference room crumbled in a chaotic rush of information. But amidst that storm, a stark truth was revealed. The ceremonial structure of the royal court, the most exquisite porcelain glaze, had collided with a cruel reality and shattered. Two figures representing the next generation, William and Catherine, undertake a strategic retreat. Their silence is not emptiness, but a message more powerful than any written text. They move as if evacuating from a crumbling structure, because, in a certain analytical sense, they are the epicenter of this chain reaction. In an instant, information transcends all digital boundaries. London, New York, Tokyo, financial and cultural centers are shaken simultaneously. But the most remarkable aspect of this sociological phenomenon is crowd polarization. Public opinion was torn into two opposing hypotheses, a necessary purge. The public hailed this action as the victory of principle over sentiment, a leader refusing to let the throne be compromised by toxic personal alliances, a cold political move. The opposition questioned, was this an internal purge, where the succession faction exploited the king's declining health to eliminate rivals? Amidst the clamor of millions of hypotheses, the core question remains unanswered. What data was powerful enough to trigger an order to destroy the relationship in public? To find that hidden variable, we must follow a process. Time travel. Let's turn back the clock to T-7 days. Location, Sandringham, an absolute safe zone where surveillance cameras are neutralized. It's a symbolic moment, the anniversary of their alliance. Despite the immense biological stress, the leader performs a classic romantic ritual, an exquisite item wrapped in velvet, a brooch. He wishes to personally present it, a gesture affirming their enduring bond. This is the climax of the tragedy, an act of absolute trust performed on the brink of devastating betrayal. Let's re-establish the spatial context. A powerful figure walks in the shadows of historical corridors. In this rare moment, he sheds the armor of a monarch to return to his most primal face, a husband seeking connection. The flickering lanterns not only illuminate the portraits of his ancestors, but also symbolize the fragile hope amidst the storm of illness. But the law of tragedy is that it always strikes when defenses are at their lowest. The first signal of anomaly came through hearing. A familiar voice, once programmed to convey comfort and warmth, suddenly shifted frequency. It became cold, clipped, and commanding. This was not the tone of a wife, but the voice of an operator issuing directives. A primal defense mechanism, what we call intuition or a sixth sense, immediately triggered a freeze response just outside the oak door. And the information gathered afterward is the key to unraveling the entire collapse. I need a report that's more serious than it actually is. That's the decoded message. The person on the other end of the line, Dr. H, the one holding the key to the king's life. Let's analyze the ruthlessness in this tactic. This is an act of adjusting medical parameters. The plan wasn't to poison the body, but to poison. Company profile. By instructing doctors to use technical terms such as systemic exhaustion or indefinite isolation required. But the shock didn't stop there. A new connection was immediately established. The tone shifted from cold to excited, a sign of someone about to checkmate. Prepare the documents for the committee. Don't let the hesitant get in the way. This was the decisive move, the coup in writing. The plan was to exploit the king's exaggerated health condition to activate a provisional regency council. In practical terms, while the king was isolated by fabricated medical diagnoses, actual governing power would be transferred to the regent. A reign from behind the velvet curtain. Imagine the psychological weight on the man standing outside the door. He is witnessing a scenario where his spouse and most trusted doctor conspire to usurp his power. The velvet box in his hands, a symbol of love and affection, slips from fingers numb with the truth. Its fall is not merely physical, but the shattering of a decades-long alliance. The velvet box hits the carpet, a physically weightless fall, yet carrying the destructive force of a psychological explosion. Let's analyze this symbol. It's not just a gift left behind. It's the unilateral termination of a decades-long agreement. A choice that defied all norms, traditions, and ancestral approvals, now reduced to a tool in the game of another's interests. But this is where the historical data about the individual becomes crucial. Instead of collapsing as predicted by the opponent, the subject made a tactical retreat. The blue box remains as a silent witness. From this point, a counterintelligence operation is activated. Publicly, the message being conveyed is strict medical rest. Media signals are weak, and approval ratings fluctuate. But this is the perfect disguise. Behind the velvet curtain of isolation lies not resignation, but the intense focus of someone forged in military discipline and inheriting the silent reign of a great predecessor. Intelligence assessment. Every space is under surveillance. The adversary is not far away, but within the closest circle. Therefore, every action must be absolutely precise. Operational location, the Royal Library, where the system's memory is stored, a rare safe zone. Here, the data verification process began. What emerged was a shock to information governance. Under the desk lamp, two files lay side by side. The same subject, the same authentication seal of the medical director, yet the contents depicted two opposing realities, one confirming stable indicators, fully under control, ensuring executive capacity, the other portraying a scenario of systemic collapse, nervous exhaustion, and a recommendation for indefinite suspension of authority. Recommendation for indefinite suspension of authority. This comparison leads to an undeniable conclusion. The opposing side manipulated key personnel to create a manufactured crisis. The ultimate goal, using medical procedures to legitimize the transfer of power. But identifying the tool, the fabricated documents, is not enough. The scale of the network must be determined. Who are the other knots in this system? This is where another analytical mind comes in, one known for its obsessive meticulousness. A new variable appears in the equation. Catherine, Princess of Wales. During a routine administrative information review, a task that seemed monotonous, the first variable surfaced. Subject of observation, Catherine. With the acuity of someone attuned to fine details, she detected an anomalous communication pattern. Electronic signals exchanged between the Queen and medical specialist H did not follow standard administrative time protocols. They appeared during late-night gray zone hours using highly encrypted language. There were no medical terms, only parameters of scheduling and logistical arrangements. Then an attachment appeared like a blazing red exclamation mark on the radar screen. Protocol B, Plan B. An instinctive alert of an internal security threat was triggered. The data was immediately transferred to the air. Consider William's position. He was under dual pressure from two fronts: the safety of his father and the burden of executing the transfer of power. His trust in the stability his stepmother was supposed to provide was crushed by reality. This evidence landed like a sledgehammer on the very foundation of that trust. From that moment on, a special task force spanning 3 generations was formed in the shadows: Charles, William, and Catherine. They no longer operated as a family, but as an internal intelligence unit. To confront a sophisticated conspiracy, they were forced to deploy modern operational methods, using end-to-end encrypted communication channels, disabling physical surveillance points within the palace, and analyzing metadata and server logs. And the result of the data mining process is the smoking gun is irrefutable evidence, a digital audio recording. When the recording was played, it wasn't just sound, it was a verdict. The subject's voice rang out, cold and calculating, directing the inflating of risk indicators to trigger the mechanism for removing the leader. It was irrefutable evidence that manipulating the constitutional process. The intelligence data package, including audio recordings, corroborating reports, and email sequences, was placed on the king's desk. Let's pause the analysis for a moment. We've just touched the black box containing the most brutal truth. Before we enter the room where the judgment of conscience is carried out, I need a confirming signal from you. If you also feel outraged by this cold-blooded manipulation and support William's efforts to clean up the system, please hit the like button immediately to empower justice. And don't forget to subscribe to officially join our intelligence network. Your action will help the algorithm bring this truth to more people. Now, let's see how the king will handle this heartbreaking data package. The feeling of hearing your spouse view you as a technical obstacle to be eliminated, rather than a human being, is undoubtedly a deep traumatic experience. But the protocol of a king doesn't allow for emotional breakdown. A cold decision is made. Take the final ethics test. Not a quarrel, but an opportunity for the opponent to confess. A final favor before judgment is carried out. The setting: a closed living room where the silence is heavier than lead. The subject enters with the confidence of someone who has been operating the political chessboard for decades. She relied on social engineering and the allure of the past to conceal the truth. But the king's tactics had changed. He didn't immediately release the evidence. Instead, he used his gaze, a blend of the sadness of betrayal and supreme authority, to conduct a soft interrogation. "How is my health?" And was there anything noteworthy about your conversation with Dr. H? The answer he received was a perfect denial. A slight smile, a dismissive wave. That was the moment the psychological trap snapped shut. She chose the path of denial, unaware that she was standing on the edge of a truth already exposed. Faced with a moral test, the subject activated a classic defense mechanism: denial and blame shifting. She constructed an alternate reality in which the act of power seizure was disguised as fear for personal safety. The attack vectors were even redirected toward invisible, jealous rivals. But for a seasoned observer like Charles, the complete absence of the regret parameter in her emotional data was the final answer. No remorse, only calculation. It was a moment of clear recognition. This wasn't a random systemic error, but a deliberately designed feature. The conclusion was reached. Personal pain was insignificant compared to systemic risk. A monarchy could not operate on a foundation of deception. Immediately, the highest administrative order was issued. This was not a delay, but an absolute transfer of power. Charles, seated at the historic desk, carries out the final operations to disconnect himself from the network of authority. An abdication decree, transferring administrative rights to the next generation, William V. A handwritten letter is sealed. It is never sent, instead archived as a dead file, a witness to a chapter of life that has come to a close. Consider this trade-off: 70 years waiting to get the system up and running, and then abandoning it in less than 2 years. The motivation isn't weakness, but awakening, sacrificing power to protect the honor of the institution. In the days that followed, Britain underwent a complete software upgrade. The coronation of King William V was not merely a ceremony, but a system purge procedure. The image of King William and Queen Catherine on the balcony is not merely a symbol of power, but a message of integrity restoration. The cheering crowd celebrates not just a new monarch, but the palpable sense that a critical security vulnerability has been patched. Global media shifts its tone, from scandal-driven headlines to in-depth analyses of the former king's moral courage. While the new system operates smoothly in the spotlight, a silent purge unfolds elsewhere. The former queen, now an entity stripped of all royal identifiers, receives the order to exit the center of power. No noise, no farewell. Such is the price paid when a toxic variable is expelled by the immune system of history. This is a hypothetical story, but it raises a very real question about power and responsibility. The question I want to leave with you is this: what do you think is the greatest legacy of a leader? The length of time they hold power, or the way they choose to let it go in order to protect core values? Share your view with a number. Press 2. Holding on to power until the very end is true strength. Press 5. Knowing when to let go is true greatness. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so we can continue decoding the next analytical case files together. There is no code of honor, no escort protocol, and absolutely no acknowledgement. The subject walks through corridors that were once the stage of her authority, but now her access has been permanently revoked. Her luggage is reduced with ruthless efficiency. An unmarked vehicle quietly departs through the rear gate, the route reserved for elements that must be removed from the historical chain without noise. There is no glance back. The interface on the woman's face, once displaying ambition, pride, and defiance, has now switched to a blank state. An old system has officially been powered down. For those who once stood at the center of power, there is now isolation at remote coordinates. No more spotlight, only silence, a digital world's sentence of erasure through forgetting. At his private estate, Charles initiates the recovery process. He accepts relinquishing the hardware, the crown, and the incompatible software, old relationships, in exchange for a core value, clean conscience data. Inner balance is finally restored after decades of systemic interference. In the silence, a historical audit is underway. Charles's memoir is not merely a narrative, but a dataset that decodes every turning point. Security vulnerabilities, the way coordinated units, William Kate, protected the system, the algorithm of duty, the painful choice to place national responsibility above personal, emotional variables. The image of the sealed letter that was never sent is the most haunting line of code, representing secrets forever left in the past to safeguard the dynasty's future. In the final entry, Charles draws a core lesson. Love can be a noise-inducing algorithm that blurs logic, but justice is an absolute constant. He accepted the destruction of his personal happiness to achieve the highest possible resolution of truth. The removal of the Camilla variable was only the beginning. Analysts uncovered a transoceanic sabotage network linking London to the California network node, Montecito. This was not an isolated incident, but a systematic architecture of subversion aimed at the very core of the monarchy. The network's new objective is exceptionally sophisticated: an attack on the legitimacy of the future heir, George. This operation employed fabricated data, falsified records and disinformation, and a manufactured doubt campaign aimed at undermining the biological lineage and traditions of the institution. Catherine, the firewall, activated a high-precision investigative protocol. By applying the follow-the-money method, she cracked through complex layers of financial transactions used to fund the smear campaign. The terminal point of this transaction chain traced back to entities linked to senior personnel within an office in California. At the command center in Montecito, a figure watches events unfold through a live screen, witnessing a collapse of perception as layers of masks are stripped away. She believed that geographical distance and intermediary shields would provide protection. But in the digital age, nothing is safe when the opponent controls the source data. After a strategic miscalculation triggers a cascading failure, she activates an evidence destruction protocol. Yet in the era of cloud computing and digital forensics, total erasure is an illusion. The data has already been transmitted and cannot be recalled, and legal warnings begin to sound as a storm of litigation takes shape. She realizes that an ocean of distance is no longer a legal safe zone. Harry, the spouse, steps into a pressure-filled space, anxious about being shut out of the flow of information. The only response he receives is a shake of the head and silence, reflecting the frustration of an operator realizing her system is collapsing. She regrets having dragged the entire family into a no-exit game, but survival instinct quickly takes over. Meanwhile, at Windsor, Queen Catherine restores order by protecting the core assets, symbolized by her reading to the heir, an assertion of sovereignty and security. The attack on the bloodline failed, and the family's protective firewall held firm. The event concluded with a system reboot, the coronation of King William V, marking the launch of an upgraded and fully patched royal operating system. The institution has survived an extreme stress test. Camilla's ambitions and the schemes from Montecito were eliminated. The system not only endured, but emerged purer and more transparent, ushering in a new era defined by integrity and accountability. From the observation post, the former administrator senses acceptance and trust in the next generation, William, and the solid firewall, Catherine. Despite having to erase memories spanning decades, he executes a hard reset to cleanse the system and hand over to the successors a clean platform where integrity and justice serve as the foundation protecting the kingdom. Camilla, high-risk strategy. Wagering on bold, hazardous moves and ultimately facing the collapse of her support system. Meghan, external offensive strategy. Attempting to exert influence from afar, only to be met with crackdowns from legal barriers and karmic repercussions. Catherine, a resilient defensive strategy. Persevering through stability and integrity, ultimately emerging victorious and becoming a symbol of endurance. The system has undergone a rigorous stress test across 3 generations. Charles, the one who re-established the system. William, the new operator who accepts the weight of the crown. George, the future secured behind a solid firewall of security. Is this a necessary purification process to safeguard the sanctity of duty? Or is it a calculated revenge, a strategic counterstrike by a man deeply wounded by betrayal? Justice or revenge? A sacred duty or earthly pain? Courage or cruelty? The line between them is as thin as a strand of hair. This content is purely for reference, based on unverified hypotheses and public speculation. This content is purely for informational purposes, based on unverified hypotheses and opinions. Let's discuss it further from a customer analysis perspective. Let's discuss it from an objective, analytical perspective. Don't just sit back. Engage with me. Press 1 if you're curious and 0 if you're skeptical. Hit like and subscribe now to join me in uncovering the truth behind the veils. Recently, a hypothesis has given many people pause. Why have priceless treasures like Queen Victoria's brooch or Princess Diana's pearl necklace suddenly vanished, leaving only vague notes behind? Some unverified sources even suggest this could be the sign of a cross-border underground network where absolute trust in supreme authority becomes a fatal flaw. Comment 1 if you believe this is a battle to protect heritage. Comment 0 if you think the secret runs even deeper. Like and subscribe now to join us in decoding the architecture of power and the buried truths. Beneath the gilded domes where time seems to stand still due to the impenetrable security of the British palaces, lie treasures measured not just in carats, but in millennia of history. They are symbols of an immutable system of power. However, a shocking theory is emerging. Can a fortress of faith be breached from within? When routine inventory checks, which were once merely procedural, turn into tense reconciliation sessions, an invisible truth begins to emerge. Everything began like a cold draft slipping through the corridors of Kensington Palace. Iconic objects, the jade brooch of Queen Victoria, the legendary pearl necklace once gifted by a Middle Eastern king to the late Princess Diana, now existed only as vague notes in archival records. When artifacts that were meant to appear at national events suddenly remained absent for years, the explanations of restoration or on loan began to reveal troubling gaps in logic. Amid the erosion of traditional values, Prince William took an unprecedented step. Bypassing official channels, he turned to Simon Harcourt, a specialist in identifying security vulnerabilities, a quiet operator who dealt exclusively with the cracks beneath the surface of high society. In a discreet room where daylight was smothered by heavy curtains, an investigation grounded in historical data analysis began. The notebook revealed more than missing items. It exposed a systemic collapse. Harcourt scrutinized decades of records, tracing the faintest clues on clasps and cuts. In a system of absolute control, is this a simple error or a dark internal shift? It begs the question, is heritage eternal, or can everything simply be replaced? Simon Harcourt's investigation no longer stopped at hypotheses on paper. He understood that in the world of national treasures, every gemstone carries its own distinct genetic code, its cut, its clarity, even the way it is mounted into its metal setting, and at a discreet auction in Paris accessible only to encrypted entities, a diamond necklace surfaced that through it was the ultimate silent witness, a custom clasp matching 1970s records perfectly. This shattered the palace's facade, yet the true horror wasn't the value but the systemic method behind it. Harcourt uncovered a sophisticated legal camouflage, where royal treasures were deliberately masked with vague labels like European provenance or 19th century relics. A cross-border network emerged, traces stretching from Geneva and Antwerp to Dubai, perfect buffer zones for the movement of high-value assets, and a strange commonality appeared as well. Despite passing through multiple auction houses, every trail led back to the same legal representative and a single luxury logistics firm, making it clear this was not an isolated theft, but a deliberate historical purge orchestrated by an entity with both access to the royal vaults and the authority to approve transfers without triggering any alarm systems. As the list of displaced fragments grew longer, Prince William faced a harsh reality. What was being lost was not jewelry, but entire chapters of a nation. Harcourt identified a fatal flaw in the security system: absolute trust in supreme authority. When a signature from the highest level appeared on documents authorizing the removal of artifacts for restoration or diplomatic exhibition, every layer of security automatically stood down and the pursuit shifted from objects to people. In a dimly lit cafe in Antwerp, a veteran gemstone appraiser revealed a crucial detail. 2 years earlier, he had been asked to evaluate stones of regal beauty for an anonymous client. The intermediary was a figure with impeccably British mannerisms, yet who spoke French with effortless fluency during confidential calls, and the stones the expert identified were precisely the missing pieces from the palace collection. See, the trail was no longer made up of lifeless numbers. It had begun to take the shape of a specific individual. Within a power structure built on some of the strictest rules in the world, what is truly more frightening: the enemy from outside, or the betrayal embedded within the very procedures designed to safeguard trust? When the symbols of the past are quietly sold off, does the true value of the crown lie in its diamonds, or in a loyalty that has begun to fracture? In the world of heritage artifacts, human memory may fade, but expert appraisers do not. In a quiet, secluded corner, a former gemstone specialist who had spent his entire life reading the character of crystals provided a piece of destiny. 3 of the missing stones from the list were accurately identified by him through photographs. The trail lay not only in the material but also in the behavioral portrait of the transporter. He spoke impeccable English, yet transacted in French, a sophisticated operator. He wasn't a thief, he was a logistics architect. Suspicion soon fell on Charles Everley. As a former senior aide, Everley held the master keys. He knew every artifact's history and the palace's secret security protocols. Everley's departure into the shadows 3 years earlier and his re-emergence as a private heritage consultant created a strikingly alarming correlation. During a calculated meeting at an exclusive London club, where privacy was the ultimate principle, Harcourt witnessed the moment of a cracked facade. With just a subtle mention of the legendary sapphire ring, Everley's calm gaze shifted into a cold, calculating precision. It was the reflex of someone holding a secret the entire world was seeking. The investigative analysis entered a critical phase as Harcourt cross-referenced 3 independent streams of data movement schedules, auction logs, and vault access records. The data revealed that Everly was not acting alone. On trips to gray financial hubs like Geneva and Monaco, he was frequently accompanied by a figure enjoying diplomatic immunity, a privilege allowing luggage and shipments to pass through any border unchecked. As the layers of fog were peeled back, the system pointed to a single convergence, an entity with the authority to sign decrees, the influence to conceal vulnerabilities, and the proximity to render all suspicion inconceivable. That entity was Queen Camilla. This hypothesis raises a staggering question. Could a core member of the royal family be involved in the self-dismantling of their own dynasty's treasures? How do you assess Queen Camilla's role in this enigmatic architecture? Type 2, if you are impressed by her quiet power, or 5, if you believe in the eternal preservation of the monarchy. Like and subscribe now to not miss the moment we unravel the final links in this dramatic journey of power. With unrestricted access and the ability to legitimize jewelry shipments for diplomatic purposes, Camilla possessed a unique position to operate a system of asset transfers that no one dared question. For Prince William, this was no longer a simple security investigation. This was a crisis of integrity of the crown. When a security system is built on absolute trust, isn't the greatest risk that this trust might be used as a tool for personal gain? If this evidence is true, is this a single act of self-interest or a sign of a deep rift in the power structure we have come to trust? Will you choose to protect tradition or expose the truth, even if that truth might bring down an entire monument? Every systemic investigation reaches a critical point where the data is no longer just lifeless numbers, but becomes a living entity. The indictment of history. Over the course of 2 weeks, Harcourt conducted a multi-tiered verification process. Witnesses at European auction houses posing as appraisal experts revealed a crucial detail. A woman with an air of utmost nobility was directly involved in the process. Revaluation, royal relics. The act of removing gloves to open the velvet box containing the Victorian jade brooch was not merely a noble gesture. It was the moment the truth was revealed under the lights of the private appraisal rooms. When the leather-bound file was placed on Prince William's desk, the space seemed compressed by the weight of systemic betrayal. The chosen location was the Blue Room at Buckingham Palace, a space symbolic of silence and eternal secrets. Here, Queen Camilla's composure confronted the cold resolve of the future monarch. As the file was pushed across the desk, a scenario unfolded of heritage erosion. It has been exposed. Camilla didn't deny the meetings, cloaking them in diplomatic protocols and secure restoration. But when pressed for records, silence followed. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a war between sacred tradition and cold pragmatism. Though she offered no confession, the balance of power had shifted forever. Camilla exited with a stoic face, yet her silence confirmed an irreparable rift. Immediately, a shadow shift swept through the palace. Sudden absences and nervous aids signaled the start of power isolation. The system was rapidly closing ranks to shield its core from the inevitable media storm. Prince William faces a choice that could be life or death for the monarchy. Revealing the truth could shatter an image built over centuries, but remaining silent would mean compromising on historical values. In the world of royalty, sometimes the unspoken words possess the most devastating power. Jewelry can be recovered or replaced with perfect replicas, but ethical standards. Once a system has been compromised, it can never be restored to its original state. When national treasures are no longer kept in vaults, but become pawns in clandestine deals, are we witnessing the end of an era of trust? In your opinion, does the integrity of a monarchy lie in the glittering diamonds on its crown, or in the transparency of those who wear it? Is silence the best way to protect the monarchy, or will that very silence be a poison that gnaws away at the future? In the architecture of power, hesitation is sometimes more dangerous than a direct attack. CE.